Earlier this year, I did an investigation into Plus-Tyres, and I found that a lot of the time they're actually a fair bit faster than conventional tyres. So I wanted to take them out of the controlled environment and put them into a race environment and see how I could get on there. So to that end, I've been racing the Tweedlove International Enduro up in Scotland, which takes in 7 stages over 2 days and is much the same format as the Enduro World Series races that have been held there the last couple of years. I also wanted to test Plus-Tyres in a much longer and slacker bike than I used last time. There's only really one bike that fits the bill, and that's the Pole EvoLink 140. It's got a 64-degree head angle and just over a 1300mm wheelbase, so it definitely ticks the long and slack box. Also, there's room for a 3-inch tyre in those chainstays. This has actually got a shorter fork offset than normal at 44mm as opposed to 51mm, so it brings the axle a little bit closer. I've teamed that with a 40mm stem instead of the stock 35mm stem. The combination of that slightly shorter fork offset and slightly longer stem seems to help to keep the front wheel weighted on flat corners, which is something I struggled with to start with this bike. I've also put a 40mm rise bar on there, giving me a really high bar height, which probably isn't ideal in flat corners, but on steep terrain, it actually allows you to weight the front wheel more because you can push the front tyre down into holes and down steep chutes and what have you. Kind of like having a highly sagged suspension fork. It allows you to keep pressure on the front tyre. As for the tyres, I started off using the 3-inch specialised purgatory and ground controls that I used in my last Plus test. The problem was that with this non-boost fork, there wasn't quite enough room, so the front tyre was just scraping the fork. Also, I found that in the greasy rocks and roots of the Tweed Valley, the compound was just a bit hard and they were kind of sliding a little bit, especially under braking. So I've replaced them with these tyres. I've got a 2.8-inch Schwalbe Knobby Nick on the front. That's got the Trailstar compound, which is quite soft and seems to grip a lot better. Out back, I've got a Maxxis Recon, also 2.8-inch wide, a nice fast rolling tyre that gives kind of quite good predictable grip. By going from 29-inch wheels to 27 plus with a 2.8 tyre, that drops the bottom bracket by about 12mm. It's now about 336mm, which is pretty low, but I wouldn't say too low, especially this bike comes with 170mm cranks. So while clearance is pretty tight and I was clipping a few pedals, I think that low bottom bracket height is actually about right. As the name suggests, the Tweedlove International Enduro is held in the Tweed Valley in Scotland, between Glentress and Innerleithen. This involved a lot of very tight, steep trails with trees right close to your handlebars and really tight, twisty corners. During practice, I was starting to think that this maybe wasn't the best bike for the job. For starters, I only really get on with quite wide handlebars. These are 780mm wide. That makes it a little bit harder to fit between those tight trees. Also because it's such a high handlebar, once you lean it into the corners, you're more liable to catch those trees. So it seems to me that one of the main differences between an enduro bike and a downhill bike in terms of geometry is that with downhill you know exactly where you're going. And enduro, sometimes you have to make sort of last minute changes of direction. Although I found the bike a bit cumbersome and hard to maneuver when I wasn't quite sure of my lines and where I was going, once I had practiced the stages and could set up for those corners better, I actually found it tackled those tight, steep corners really quite well. There's this perception that Plus-Tyres have loads of grip but are really draggy and slow rolling. Actually, I've found the opposite to be the case. They roll really fast, especially over rough terrain. They carry speed really well. But compared to the tyres I would normally run for kind of rooty, muddy terrain, we're talking tyres like a Schwalbe Magic Mary or a Maxxis Shorty, for example. Compared to those sort of tyres, these have less grip, especially in the mud, but they're a lot faster rolling. And I actually found that reflected in the results. The stages I did best in were the kind of flatter, more open stages. The steeper, more technical, slippery trails, actually, I was further back. Now that could be to do with me as a rider, but it does tie in really well with what I've found testing Plus-Tyres in controlled conditions. So this is where I love to say, you know, oh, I won the race and Plus-Tyres are definitely the future of enduro racing. Of course, that didn't happen. I definitely wasn't fast enough to hang out with the top guys, but I was quite pleased to beat enduro legend Tracy Mosley in one of the stages, although she did school me in the overall. So whilst these tyres are quite fast rolling and they grip really well in sort of loose and bumpy terrain, the front was quite prone to squirming on hard pack kind of bike parky trails. So it could definitely do with a thicker casing. And while I didn't suffer with any punctures during the race, the rear could do with a thicker casing too, for peace of mind against punctures. These are amongst the most aggressively treaded Plus tyres out there, but for these kind of muddy conditions and steep trails, I definitely could have done with more aggressive tread on both tyres. But Plus tyre versions of more aggressive tread patterns such as the Maxxis DHR2 are in the pipeline. I just hope they come with a properly thick, heavy-duty casing as well. Consistently I found that for my style of riding, Plus tyres can be significantly faster. But in order for Plus tyres to make a significant impact on the enduro racing scene, we'll need to see tyres that are appropriate for enduro racing. And that means more aggressive tread and thicker casings. I've continued to do tests on this bike with Plus tyres and 29 tyres, and I've continued to see that Plus tyres are generally faster. So I'm excited to see if Plus tyres will make their way into mainstream enduro racing. I've also been experimenting with using a Plus tyre on the rear for better rollover, with a conventional 29-inch tyre on the front for more precision, with some interesting results, but that's for another day.